you all started. That's great. So nice and easy and gently as always. And as always, if you have any questions, feel free to unmute and ask questions. I quite like questions actually because they often open up interesting areas. Or you could, as I said before, you're welcome outside of the class to email me. And somebody did that this morning for one of the classes, not this one, but one of the other classes, and said, can we look at this? And so, and I'm always happy to do that. Apart from that, it's the same routine as you start off, and with that, hopefully a kind of familiarity, a sense of arriving or coming home or something like that. And that would be very easy to take for granted, I think. So we want to guard against that because there's always something new going on. But at the same time, this sense of familiarity actually helps us to feel more comfortable and means that we are more likely to notice other details that if we were less familiar with what was going on would be harder to spot. So somebody once said to me, and it's an obvious question really, but I was quite taken aback by the question. They said, don't you ever get bored doing the same things over and over again? And I had to stop and think about it. And it was like, well, actually, no, I don't. It doesn't feel like I'm doing the same thing. It's like if you go to the beach or you go to a wood for a walk or somewhere like that. It's the same place, and yet there's always something different going on. So try and keep a sort of alertness. It can be quite difficult if you're feeling tired, if you had a busy weekend and you're feeling a bit tired. It's harder to maintain that sharper quality. That will vary from day to day for us. But at least some of the time, just try and have this sort of inquisitiveness, I suppose you'd call it, a curiosity about what is going on. And you'll find over a period of time, some things will remain constant, other things will just change and evolve. Pause. Now, just raise your arms a little. Mostly I do this with people with their hands palm up. And you'll feel here, so because you can see my elbows dropping down, these muscles here on the inside of the arm take the load, but you want to get a sense that your wrist is somehow like there's a loop hanging from the ceiling supporting your wrist, rather than straining in your shoulders to raise your arms. But we can get a couple of little variations on this by changing the orientation of the arm. So you could, for instance, turn your hands palm in like you're holding a ball. And you'll feel it slightly different in your arms. You can turn your hands palm down. It's different again. That's a rotation from the shoulder, I should say. So don't just turn your wrist. Do it as a sort of complete rotation. I mean, that's exaggerated, but a complete rotation of the arm. And you can turn your hands palm out. Good, and then just drop your arms down again. I quite like doing that because I think it just sort of moves the feeling around my arm just a little. So hips drop down and just rocking your weight forwards and backwards. hopefully by now you've all got a pretty good idea of what's happening in your feet, a sense of where your weight might be most balanced, but also what happens when you move out of that line just a little. So when I go forwards, I feel here in the hamstrings and my calves, and a bit in the back and buttocks, they're engaging those muscles, not stiff, not tight. And then when I go back, it feels to me more here that they're engaging. And those two, you know, I suppose I hesitate to call it stretching, but it is it's the muscle extending, and then it would naturally contract. So at a certain point, when I go forwards, the extending quality in the back of my legs will kind of take over and pull me back. And likewise, you know, the opposite going forwards. And then letting your hands follow. So this means that you'll feel more movement in your back, in the front of your body, in your shoulders, and your arms, of course. But the same thing, overall, when I go back, I get this opening in the front of my body. So, and then that starts to contract in, and eventually I feel the opening in my back. And this rhythm that sets up between this dynamic between open and close is one way of describing it, between compression and release. The different ways of describing it. Yin yang is basically the rhythm that will work all the way through the movements that we do. Every time you do one particular movement in one direction, it carries with it the potential, it builds the potential for the opposite movement. And what we want to try and do is to make sure that we don't, for instance, here it's fine and I can just feel, you know, the pull in my legs, and that starts to pull me back. What I don't want to do is like force myself forwards. No, I'm not going to go back. I don't want to start getting into a fight with my body. So I've mentioned before this idea of just judging that moment where the force acting in one direction begins to overcome the force acting in the other, and we want that changeover to be smooth and harmonious. So you have to be quite alert to this. There's only, you know, you've got quite a small margin for error when we try and do that. And this time, letting your weight come to rest, hips dropping back. So here, it's the feeling in your legs that begin to push you up. And here, it's the pull of gravity overcoming that energy from the legs. It works, as you know, in different patterns depending on the exercise, but the underlying principle is still the same. In Chinese medicine, one of the kind of phrases is that yin will always change to yang and yang will always change to yin. The only difference really is whether we take some kind of ownership of that. I could just keep pushing myself, and eventually I'd go over yin. But better to find that moment of change and just sort of work with that dynamic. One more round. Now change to the wild goose. And parting the clouds. One more time. And then going back to rooting down, doing this as a series of 3. So rooting down and the wild goose. And parting the clouds. Just notice where you feel the movement working within your body, where you feel the expansion, the contraction more dominantly. I mean, in one sense, it works through the whole of your body, but you may notice a bit of a difference between the different exercises. So I always think in terms of the belly, the lower dantian with rooting down has been the main point of focus when I do it like this. And then here, the middle dantian in the chest. I come up on my toes slightly. And then again, for the third one, again coming up on the toes, the upper dantian. So we have this exercise that becomes one that we call balancing or harmonizing the 3 dantians. Or it's a variant on that exercise, actually. The actual exercise is very similar to this, just slightly different. And I've just adapted it to more familiar exercises. So in each round, the movement gradually moves up your body a little bit more. It reminds me a little bit of watching the tide come in on a beach and the waves sort of like gradually creeping up the shore. And those 3 dantians, or in Chinese medicine, they're sometimes referred to as the triple heater. So this can either be balancing the 3 dantians or the triple heater exercise. It's kind of dual purpose in that sense. There's a slight difference between them, but one way or another, the concern is with the overall sort of homeostatic balance of the body. There isn't an actual organ called triple heater, although it's regarded as an organ system in Chinese medicine. But its function is this overall sense of governing the body, shall we call it. The interrelationships in it within the body. as I say, for the second two of these, I come forward slightly, so my heels come a little bit off the ground, but not for the first one. Do one more round of this. And when we change to dragon plucks the stars from the sky, you may notice the same sort of rise and then fall in through one side. So whenever we say things that say this is such and such exercise, it does this, it's never exclusive. It's not the only function of that particular exercise, nor is it the only exercise that could perform that function. You know, this sense of the overall, what I refer to as homeostatic balance within the body, is something that any of the exercises can offer us. But it's quite nice sometimes to have a particular exercise or set of movements to focus on a particular aspect, if only because it encourages you to focus. One more time. Then we change to pushing in 4 directions. And in the same way that the movement moves progressively up the body, so does the turn. So you turn a little bit more in the middle of the body than you do in the hips, a little bit more in the shoulders than you do in the middle of the body, but only to a point where you still feel that elasticity. You're not, again, straining. So it's very subtle. From the outside, barely noticeable. So when we start to look at the exercises in this way, and again, you know, try and keep a memory of that sort of balancing the Sui Dan Qians and how the different parts of the body relate to each other, we begin to understand a little bit more the phrase that when one part of the body is in motion, the whole body is in motion. Or rather, I tend to think that the whole body is engaged, but you get the idea. Because it's not just the arms, it's not just our hips, it's not just our legs. It's also about the sort of relationship between them, the movement between them. Do one more round. And then change it. So each exercise uses this, the whole body and mind. And yet at the same time, each exercise has its own distinctive characteristics. So there's a sort of I suppose you could always describe it as a two-part awareness going on here, something very generalized and something more specific. And add in the turn if that's comfortable. And then switch sides. And then add in the turn. And now rowing a boat in the middle of the lake. One more time. And stand. Shake out. As I said before, when I use the term Dantian, I'm referring to regions. In some circumstances, it would be appropriate to refer to particular points. But you have to remember with all of these terms, really, they've been around for a couple of thousand years, and they've been interpreted and reinterpreted and misinterpreted and so on and so forth through all of that time. So what I'm referring to are three areas of the body here, around the belly and the waist, here around sort of solar plexus and the lower part of the chest, and here generally with the head. That's based on an understanding of the term Dantian, the translation of the term Dantian, which means sea of energy. So if you think of it as a sea rather than a point, then you get the impression of an area. I believe it's the middle Dantian is sometimes referred to as the cinnabar field, the yellow field in some context. So if you do any reading or you train with somebody else, they talk about the Dantians in a slightly different way. This is normal. It's a bit confusing, but it is also quite kind of normal. The triple heater that I mentioned refers to these three regions. So belly, solar plexus, and then the upper part of the chest. So it's not quite parallel. You're welcome to think of it in any way you wish, really, out of those choices. But one way or another, when we do the exercise, balancing the three Dantians or the triple heater, it's this sense of continuity through the body. when the wave comes into the beach, it reaches so far and then it withdraws. It's still connected to the sea. Then it comes in, and like a few moments later, the next wave may go a little bit further, and so on and so forth. Always linked, if you like, with the overall sea. Now take a slightly wider stance. So different people have different associations with the three Dan Qians. I came across one guy, for instance, a Chinese teacher, who talked about, when we move slowly, we're moving from the lower Dan Qian. When we do quicker movements, like what they call the Pijing movements in Qian style, then we're thinking more about the middle Dan Qian. When we do the kicks in Qian style, faster kicks, higher again, it's the upper Dan Qian. So, and that was sort of part of his system, part of his understanding. There's many different areas of that. Now, in this wider stance, horse riding stance, you'll see that my feet are beyond hip width. It's a good training position for the legs. It also means that we can begin to get a bit of sideways movement without it finishing too soon. You're only going to about 60% of your weight in each leg. You go any further and you start to pull your body out of line, or you would need to change your feet. So a good all-round stance, good for the rooting down, and good for training your legs, but also to get this smooth movement from one foot to another, and a little bit of a turn. And when you turn, the furthest you will turn is to this point, where here I'm facing the direction of my right toes. And similarly here, I may not get that far. I don't seem to be getting that far on my left side for some reason today. But what you wouldn't want to do is to go any further. There, I have to show you on this side because I don't seem to be able to manage it here. There. But as soon as I go to here, I'm really pulling on that leg. I would have to do that or something like that to avoid the leg being pulled out of line. So that's an angle of what? Between the two legs, I suppose, certainly no more than 90 degrees in total. Now have your right hand in front of you, push out, and this movement from parting the wild horse's mane. And so this is quite interesting. We can relate this to that balancing the three Dan Qians, harmonizing the three Dan Qian, because we start off here right alongside the lower Dan Qian, and that sense that we get, particularly when we do part in the clouds section of that form of exercise, that sense of the rising up, something coming up, pushing up through those regions of the body. Same thing here. So because the center's turning, then you're pushing the hand out more, and because of the way it's going out, it's sort of across the body. So it doesn't matter whether you're interested in sort of Chinese medicine and you want to really sort of like locate these points, or whether you can't be bothered or it doesn't mean anything to you. These are ideas to help you relate more to what's going on within the movements. And try on the other side. So I've used the term sometimes the inner landscape of the body, and it's fundamentally training your attention, training your mind to recognize these internal movements. And it's helpful to have a system to work with on doing that. So now going into the full movement, you bring the hand back at shoulder height, hold the ball, move across and turn. Again, when you turn to hold the ball, try and do so with your whole arm. So not just your wrists. But if I exaggerate this time, if I really stick my elbow out, it sort of does this. It's almost like a crank. One more on each side. Okay. Give your legs a shake. We'll go almost to the opposite extreme. We'll do swimming dragon. Feel free to have your feet hip width apart or press together if that suits you better. This is the way the exercise is officially done. The reason I give you this as an alternative is partly because I think it's more stable, and partly because I think it's a little bit easier on the body. Swimming dragon is a strong exercise, and I don't want people to feel that they can only do it like this and kind of like twist their knees up or something like that. But if you can work towards this, then I think that's quite good. Either way, even with the feet a little bit wider, when you're doing this, notice what's happening here. And I'll exaggerate, but your knees will be doing this. And for the lower one, they'll also be bending a bit. So be careful with this. Your knee joint it's not like your elbow joint. It's not a proper hinge joint. Your knee does have a certain amount of sideways movement. And it's quite good to explore that a little bit, because it's a function of the need to do that. On the other hand, do be really careful with this, because actually this is a really common sports injury, the knee twisting over. So you want your knee to be mobile, so you want a little bit of sideways movement, but you don't want too much there. You want to be able to work the tendons there, but on either side of the knee. But you don't want to get to a point where you're kind of straining them. And so either way, whichever way you're standing, it's a strong exercise. And as always, listen to your body. Do what is appropriate for your body. I'm going to keep my feet together, so I let my knees bend a little bit, hands together, and swimming dragon. And again, the 3 dantians are a factor in this exercise for some people. These 3 circles in 3 regions of the body. The other thing to be careful of course, is your back. I suppose in a way that's fairly obvious, isn't it? A nice, smooth, fluid quality in your back is what we're looking for. Just there's areas of your back that are tight or stiff. You've got a problem with your back. Keep this very moderate. So if you've got problems, disc problems or things like osteoporosis or that kind of thing, you want some movement there, but you don't want to do too much. You want to be able to feel the movement. It doesn't matter whether somebody else can see the movement. and then going back the other way. Okay, and then let's put 1 foot forwards. So now just transferring your weight. Remember when I was saying about how a movement in one direction will load your body, load certain parts of the body for the next movement. We see that very clearly with this exercise. If you get a chance, try doing this on a bouncy castle or a trampoline. Because what will happen is, if you play around with it, you'll feel your weight going down and then you'll feel the push up. Now that's quite interesting because on a bouncy castle or trampoline, it definitely comes from outside your body, but you will feel it coming up through your leg. It's I suppose a kind of debatable point how much you feel it from outside of your body when you're doing this. In my experience, different places, different kind of ground that we're standing on will respond differently. So there is for me a sense of the energy, if you like, movement coming up from the ground. And then just raising your toes and your heel. And then stepping in. When you step out, put your heel down first. Then lower the toes. Notice that my knee is, when I do that, it's not locked back. It's still, it's a little bit bent. And then I get this feeling just pushing into the ground slightly, and then my weight follows. I push into the ground, my back foot and my weight follows. I've described that push as being a bit like walking on sand or something like that, just finding the firmer base. One very useful image I came across, that it's like walking in the stream or walking in the sea, that you're being very particular about your foot and about where it goes, the ground beneath it, and so on and so forth, before you make your next move. And then try on the other side. The term that I used to use, well, I still do actually, for the stepping is that we plant the foot. And I've always said that planting is a very definite act. You don't just sort of like throw a few seeds around, you place them. So there's a very definite act, a very definite intent when we take the step. But another thing, another phrase used to describe is that you can start to raise your toes. Some other people say that when we do the step, we do it in 4 stages. We lift the foot, we carry it forwards or backwards, we plant the foot, and then we dig. You dig in, you push in. Dig is perhaps the wrong term, but it took me a long time to get over the term dig. So perhaps think in terms of push or press. So we lift the foot, we carry it forwards, back, we plant it, and then we push in. As always, I like to have my front foot very slightly turned out. For me, it helps to get the weight down through my hip. So then, taking a few steps in whichever direction is best for you. So we want the whole of the foot to go down before we really commit the weight. So it's quite a short step, shorter than normal step. And then come back or change direction if you've already gone back. Put your right foot forward, sit back and start with pigeon spreads its wings. Again, that sense of a movement rising up, pushing up through your body. Belly to solar plexus to ribs, then your arms. So an expansion, belly, solar plexus, ribs, which kind of matches what we would like to try and do with the breathing. When we breathe, what we want to try and do is just expand in the belly and then in the solar plexus and then in the chest, creating this bellows action, drawing the air down into our lungs rather than forcing the air into our lungs. So not puffing the chest down. And this is a good exercise to try and just replicate that with. Mostly I say to people, don't kind of put too much emphasis on the breath, but this movement is actually what you would want to do in breathing. It's exaggerated, but it's that kind of thing. So see how it feels when you go forwards, to rather than taking a breath or deliberately taking a breath, see if the movement allows you to draw your breath in. It won't necessarily happen each time, by the way. You know, how much air you take in, how long it takes, and so on and so forth, how fast you have to breathe out are all variables. So you might only get halfway through going forwards before it feels better to breathe out. That's fine. It's just the principle here that we're trying to think about. Drawing the air downwards into the bottom of the lungs as much as possible. Now, just do one more of these and we'll change to fisherman cast the net. If the breathing works for you, and as always, it's very much an if, and you want to carry on with the breathing pattern, here it's the out breath as you go forwards. So we come in here, and again, it's like I'm filling up my torso with the breath, and then breathing out through the arms. That doesn't work quite so easily, I think, with that belly breathing, with the abdominal breathing. But I think if you really want to practice that, then I think pigeon spreads its wings is probably the more useful exercise. If the breath simply doesn't work for you, don't see it as a failure. Keep breathing. Just let your body breathe naturally, because the movements will encourage smooth breathing, good breathing, whether or not you're breathing to a pattern or to a method, that they will still work for you. And then pushing away. And then we'll do repulse the monkey. So sink back, leaving your right hand, front hand as it were, out in front. Sink into your back foot and turn. And notice how, again, the whole body opens, and then push and pulse. Turn, the body opens. When we get to that stage, so when we get to here, it's not dissimilar to the feeling in the body when we do the wild goose. If I do it from the side, perhaps that makes more sense. You can see there, just before I turn the hand, it's almost like I'm actually doing the wild goose. So you move the weight, you settle into the back foot, you turn. You rest there until the hands are in position. Then you come forwards and you turn again. Turn a little bit more here as you rest. Turn. So you turn as you move the weight, and you turn a little bit more as you rest on the leg. You turn as you move the weight. Turn a little bit more as you rest. One more time. Shake. When we do exercises like this, then one of the problems can be that we start thinking about the arms too much. So when I do this, I can get to here and I can start thinking, well, what am I doing here? And actually, if you think about this, this is a circular movement. And I just allow the elbow to drop. And the thing about a circle is, if you move around a circle, you would touch all points of that circle. So you will eventually arrive at the position. So one of the things that I kind of try and do with exercises like this is, when I get to here, I'm settling into my back foot and I'm just waiting. I'm not going, oh, what am I going to do with this? I'm confident that this will arrive here and then I can go forwards. What that will do sometimes is throw your timing off. It's like it's taken a long time to get there, but that's a different matter. Get confident in the pattern and then work on the timing. If it's any consolation, it is a difficult exercise to time. Sometimes you'll get there and you'll be ready to move forwards and the hand won't be in position. Other times it will get there and you're not quite ready to move. Every now and then you'll hit it dead on. You won't get it right all the time. Doesn't mean that you're not doing the exercise right. It's a tricky exercise to get right. So now on the other side, starting with pigeon spreads its wings. Generally speaking, with a lot of these things, the breath, the timing and expansion and contraction, the less we interfere, the more our body does it correctly. We just need to be aware of certain key points. Are we sinking the weight? Have we got the feet in the right position? Have we fallen back into simply waving our arms around, or can we still feel that quality of the whole body in motion? When I talked about there being two awarenesses, a general and a specific, that general awareness is the one where we really want to focus our attention mostly. And then fisherman cast a net. And then pushing a wave. And then pulse the monkey. Again, you could breathe in, expanding, breathe out. But remember always that your breath is very dependent and linked in with your posture and your movement. And it's much better to get the posture and movement correct and let your breath naturally come into harmony with them than to force your body to breathe in a way that isn't comfortable for it. One more time. And shake out. Before we finish, just don't do this. Just watch this because it's very simple. If you are interested in working with the breath, because of its dependence on posture, easily the best way of doing it, I think I can stay in camera, is to do so on your back. So watch this. You won't be able to watch. You lay on your back with your feet up like this. Just place your hands on your belly below your navel and very gently push your hands up and down. And if you can, just take a breath in and out as you do that. So you do that a little bit. Then you do the same thing on your solar plexus. You will get more movement in your solar plexus. And then the next stage is to take one hand back down and to try and do it, get this lower hand to lift, to be pushed up before the top hand. So you start to get this sense of an expansion here, followed by an expansion there. So it's a very simple idea, but quite difficult. Don't do too many at once. You can do it in a chair with your back supported as well. Only do maybe half a dozen to start off with, to retrain your body to breathe from your belly. Sometimes referred to, in fact, as prenatal breathing. It's a very natural way to breathe, but don't do too many. The first time I ever tried that, I got these stomach cramps, and I realized I'd done too many, and I strained the muscles of my stomach. But it's here and then here, this sort of expansion upwards. And if you do it on your back, you haven't got to kind of worry about whether your posture's correct or something like that. So you can train it separately. So that, if you're interested in working with your breathing, do it like that, and that will help the integration of your breath and your movement. Now rub your hands together, and then tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. One shoulder and your arm. Then on the other side. Onto your back. Around your hips. Right on your belly. Yeah. Good. So, again, just standing. If you do choose to practice the breathing, as I say, go nice and carefully, don't force anything. Just do a few each day, and gradually your body will get used to it. And then eventually you'll start to notice it in the upright position, because your body will naturally take a posture where it's able to breathe that way. And the posture it will take is the posture we use in Tai Chi. So that's kind of useful. And then sinking down and embrace tiger, and return to now. One more round. And stay. Check out. Thank you very much, everybody. So again, as always, any questions, do let me know. Happy to go over things.